What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shape their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community. I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. As the NFL prepares for the 2021 season and the preseason games start this week, I wanted to share lessons learned from one of the most high-profile coaching changes made during the league's offseason. The Jacksonville Jaguars made that change, bringing in a highly successful college coach, Urban Meyer, to take the reins in his first NFL job. This special edition includes my good friend and Episode 8 guest, John C. Maxwell, who invited me and Coach Meyer to sit for a discussion that was chock full of leadership principles that any one of us can use. And I am looking forward to sharing the recording with you.
Any success is going to be followed by complacency. One of the big reasons we're here, and what I've learned from John over the many, many years of studying him, is that you want to avoid complacency, develop leadership on your team. Average leaders have a quote, good leaders have a plan, exceptional leaders have a system.
Coach, thank you so much for joining us. And I have to tell you, when I look at your career, you followed in the footsteps of some pretty amazing coaches at Bowling Green, at Utah, Florida, Ohio State. People who were there before you were pretty incredible. How do you, as a leader, draw the experience of what your predecessors have done? How do you make the transition and decide what to bring along and what to add?
Well, first of all, it wasn't by accident. When I took the Bowling Green job, it was my first head coaching job at 36 years old. Gary Blackney is a great football coach, great leader. I actually know him from my Ohio State days as a very young coach. So I knew that there was good in that program. He's an excellent coach. Maybe things didn't go right at the end of his career. The one thing I've always warned our staff, whenever you take over for someone, I'll release you immediately if I hear you backstab or say bad things about the previous regime, because there's no, we call BCD, blame and complain and defend yourself, and I don't want to ever go backwards, go forward. When I went to Utah, I took over for Ron McBride, great football coach, excellent recruiter. Another reason I took the job was I knew there were good players in the program. Then I went to Florida, took over for Ron Zook, who followed Steve Spurrier. And Ron Zook's an excellent coach as well, a good recruiter. And then obviously when you're talking about Jim Tressel and Luke Fickell, you're talking about elite coaches. So it's not by accident. What did I draw upon? I've always kept members of the previous staff. I'm very careful who I select, but I want to, there's no one that admires Jim Tressel more than I do. So why not keep a guy like Luke Fickell and other coaches and learn from some of the great things they've done? What I find out is that the leadership style can be very different than the style we are, but it's all good. There's many different ways to do it. And probably the best skill that I have is I learn and I listen. And I'm never at the point where I think I'm finished learning. And that's one of the reasons when John called me to do this, the answer was, if I could fit it in, it was an easy yes, because I'm going to learn something today. That's what drives me.
In fact, Coach, in leadership, I say the first responsibility of a leader is to listen. You've got to find them before you can lead them. You can't find them if you don't listen. Right. So if you listen and you learn, then you have got the context to really lead them. That sounds like exactly what you're doing there. You're holding on to some previous coaches because you know that there's some gold there that you can pull off that'll help you better. That's just a great leadership trait. Walk slowly through the crowd and take your leadership cues from the people that are around you. Some of the best leadership decisions I've ever made, I didn't make them alone. I made them because I listened and watched and observed. And so the great leaders, they walk slowly through the crowd. They understand that the people that they're walking by can be a great asset to them. There's just no room for arrogance as a leader. I mean, when you think about the expression, it's lonely at the top. If you're leading people, you're taking them up the top with you. You're not like going up there and then saying, come on up here, come on up here. You take the journey with them. And it sounds to me like, Coach, you understood when you follow great leaders, there's some greatness there. There's a reason your success as a coach, the odds increase if you're following a great coach than if you followed a bad coach. I think, don't you? Because the environment's set up for leadership and coaching.
And that's the thing, that tomorrow is going to be different than today. If I still acted and coached like when I was in my 40s, there'd be someone else sitting here. I would not survive. So the ability to adapt, gather information, learn. I followed excellent coaches. I learned from every one of them. Our challenge of our staff is tomorrow is different than today. Be ready to adapt.
You know what I really loved about that answer too, Coach, is that it's easy sometimes to come in and say, oh, the last guy got fired, so I got to change it all. Many people feel that it's an insecurity, I guess, right?
Every coach that comes in blames the previous staff. See how well they do. Odds are, I would have to say it's probably a perfect correlation between that coach that does that, they fail. As opposed to, let's take the greatness from the previous staff, because there is greatness, regardless of the record. Learn from it, respect it, embrace it, and then move forward and go do your own job. Don't hit on what happened prior to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, your 2014 national championship team at Ohio State, when you all were hoisting the banner, there was a great interview done with you in which you talked about how that team loved each other in a way that was really incredible to you. What do you do as a leader to inspire that?
It goes back to my junior year in college, taking a psychology class, which I'm a psychology major. The theme of the class was motivation, the strongest forms of motivation for the human spirit. Love, fear, hate, and survival is what we came up with. I use those today. Love, fear, hate, and survival. And there's nothing stronger than love.
Oh, it was a great illustration. That championship year was a great illustration also of the law of the bench and the whole fact that the depth of a team. I mean, a third-string quarterback winning the national championships. It was great. It was really great. I'm a Buckeye fan, you know.
I got that. I figured that part out. Just hit me one more time. That's good.
Now, you know, there are three questions, Coach, that followers ask of a leader. Do they care for me? Can they help me? And do I trust them? Do you care for me? That's all about heart, compassion, what you were just talking about. Can I trust you? That's all about the character. I mean, are you going to let me down, or are you going to really watch out? And can I really trust you? And the middle question is all about competence. Can you help me? Very simple, but it's very true. Once you develop a group of people that trust you and know you care for them and that know that you can help them, they're in. They're all in.
You know, I was hired in 1996 at Notre Dame by a guy named Lou Holtz. And those are his, when you're choosing a friend, when you're choosing a career, when you're choosing a group of people that are going to be on your coaching staff, those are the characteristics you look for.
Yeah. One of the stories I've read about you that is just so fascinating to me is the story about the contract with your family. Hangs behind your desk, is that correct?
Oh, right behind it.
Right behind your desk, right. The contract grew from the challenges of leaving Florida and trying to think about the importance of family, work, balance, all those challenges that everybody has. Tell me, if you would, the backstory of that contract, and then tell me a little bit about how it's changed you.
You know, my father never missed a game. My parents, every game, they were right there. I kind of took it for granted, and a lot of players that I grew up with, they weren't there. So as I grew up, I would always promise myself that don't become that old guy that has a nice car, nice house, nice money, I guess, and look back and say, you won a couple championships, but I missed my kids growing up. And it got to me bad. That impacted me deeply my last few years at Florida, where my daughters were starting to head off and play college sports, and I would have to go do these silly speaking events. And I'd get a text from my wife, my son's pitching in the third inning, and I would get so angry I'd almost break the phone because I'm on a plane going to speak to some group that I could care less about, and they're going to sit and question me about a play call. And I think, why am I doing that? Does that have anything to do with winning a game, my job? And I determined it didn't. Then I started experiencing some health issues too. And then you start asking the tough question, is it worth it? And why am I doing it? If the answer is not yes because I love it, you're in conflict. And that's when I stepped back and said, you know, enough's enough. And I got a little help from my oldest daughter, Nikki. She was at Georgia Tech at the time. We're really close, obviously. And she says, you don't need to coach anymore.
Why did she say that to you?
Well, because I went down. I had a bad event. I had esophageal spasms. We had a 911 call, lost 37 pounds. And it's been well died. I don't like to go back there too often, but that's when I made a decision to step away. But come February, I said, I miss building a team so bad. I just missed that dearly. And so I looked at my wife on a walk one day and I said, you know, I have to do this again. She said, you're out of your mind. I almost killed you. You're going to go do it again. And that's when Ohio State was starting to have some troubles. I'm an Ohio guy. I went to Ohio State, dreamed of playing for the Buckeyes, wasn't quite good enough. So I want to take the job. And my wife looks at me and says, you're not taking that job. You better meet with your family first. And I was like, wow, I'm so used to them being this big. Now they're like adults and they have opinions. And I was so selfish, I didn't even consider it. After that, we went and had a meeting in Atlanta. It was really neat. Kids are this big. You don't ask them their opinions.
Sure.
As you become their best friend. And Nikki, she had it drawn up. And at the bottom, it said, sign here. And I think it was 12, making sure you're taking care of yourself. Always put family first. Make sure you're going to church. All the things that were very important to our family. It was a very emotional time. And I didn't realize how deep the feelings were with my wife and my 2 daughters. My son was real little still at the time. But that was one of those wow moments in a person's life. And that's why it's sitting right above my desk.
I can imagine how emotional it would be, though.
Oh.
Because these are the people who know you well. These are the people that love you the most. And you're now signing this, and basically this is a pledge. I can see why that would be, why you'd really have to think that through and say, okay, am I willing to make the changes in my coaching? Because people get on this success treadmill. All of a sudden they're doing they're going to banquets and doing speeches and doing all this stuff, and they're missing the best part of their life, and that is usually their family or the close relationships. Several years ago, Coach, I really kind of just defined success in a different way than I ever heard anybody else define it, and it really helped me tremendously with my kids and my family when they were younger. I defined success as those who know me the best, love and respect me the most. I travel and I speak. I can get up and 10,000 people and give them a great speech. Everybody claps, standing ovation. Well, those people, they see me at my best. I mean, after all, I prepared the speech, I'm all dressed up. They see me at my best. But my family, they don't see me at my best. When you go home, what do? You take out the garbage. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you do. And when the people who don't know you well love and respect you more than the people who know you well, you've missed it. When you sign that contract, I think you were signing the fact that those who know me the best are the ones that I love and respect the most, and I want them to love and respect me the most too. That's beautiful.
Teaching our players mechanisms to right the ship, because we all lose our way.
Sure we do.
And having mechanisms in place to get the arrow pointed in the right direction again is something that I've worked very hard on to make sure, whether it be my faith, whether it be my family,
sure,
and my friends.
My dad was a college president for 17 years. And I always would say to him, Dad, every incoming freshman ought to have a failure class. The first class they ought to take is a failure class. And you just sit down and say, let me explain something to you. You're going to mess up. So let's not even worry about that. Let's talk about how do you get out of your hole. Are you going to learn from the failure, or are you going to leave the failure? Because if you leave it and run, you're just going to have another failure. It's going to keep repeated. Somebody told me the other day, Don, that there are no 2 good consecutive days in a leader's life because you're always got all the responsibility. And if that's true, which I believe it is, you're going to constantly have to be doing these adjustments and having these mechanisms, these systems to pull yourself.
Well, you can't, and this is a big mantra of our program. It's Tim Kite, a guy that we work with as a leadership consultant. It's called the R Factor. Mm-hmm. You can't control the events in your life. You certainly can't control all outcomes, but you can control how you respond. We teach them on how to respond.
So when you're talking about going to create those mechanisms, it is bringing in experts. It's bringing in folks to help them grow. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, it's the other part of our leadership training. It's above the line and below the line. Below the line is impulsive, autopilot reaction to the situations. I don't want to work out today, I'm tired. Mm-hmm. So am I going to complain about it and all that? What's above the line? I'm going to go work out today because it's going to make me better. I'm going to become a better teammate. Those are not normal patterns of behavior or reaction to situations. Impulsive behavior is I'm going to go handle it. I'm going to that's not the appropriate way. So intentional action or above the line behavior is all taught. It's not normal. It's not a reactive. We're broken people. The human spirit is impulsive. We're impulsive beings. So you're darn right we try to teach them everything we can, and that's a big part of it. How do you handle this situation? What mechanisms do you have in place to get you out of that situation and make sure you do it the right way?
We'll be back after this.
Your business phone service should not be complicated to set up, manage, and use. Nextiva connects your phone system with business apps, AI, and automation on a single platform to run your business. With their easy-to-use dashboard, you will be able to connect with your team and customers all in one place. Nextiva, powering communication across the Pac-12 and now the Corporate Competitor Podcast.
Welcome back to Corporate Competitor Podcast.
You mentioned earlier getting on that run, winning all those games at Ohio State. You had an amazing consecutive game run in Florida. And, when you get it going, complacency is the greatest enemy you have. I mean, it's an amazing opponent. I can see how you can battle complacency, but how do you raise up others to understand, you know what, we can't sleep in our trophy room, right? That's not a good place to hang out. What do you do to keep complacency from setting in?
Well, every day's a challenge. Every day's different. But complacency, we always say running up the hill's fun. There's no arrows pointed at you, and it's aggressive. It takes energy, and maintenance of a program is a complete exhaustion. We go on a great run in 2014. No one's expecting us to do it. We do it, and then we're preseason number 1, and you're winning by 3 touchdowns, and everybody's critical of how your performance. And we as adults can take it, even though it's hard. But my concern, and it affected us, we would come in games after a game last year and win by several touchdowns, and I'd see there was no joy in the locker room. It was almost exactly what happened in Florida. 2008, we won the national championship. We have a great team coming back. I did not handle it very well. I was the same guy that wouldn't go to training to take victory meals, and I was very hard on our players and our coaching staff to the point where I remember them saying, no, we're not having fun anymore. Back then I didn't care. I was like, give a darn if you have fun. We're going to win the next game. I took a much different approach this year because I've been through it, and I learned, and I sought counsel from great leaders and great friends of mine. Billy Donovan, the great basketball coach at Florida, had a similar thing happen to him where they won back-to-back championships. And you just challenge it. Every team's different. I can't give you an easy answer because it's not easy. It depends on the team, depends on the situation, but complacency, everyone knows, is the enemy. You have to be on guard versus the enemy.
I had a sign in my office, Coach, one time. I had it for several years. Kept it right in front of me, and it just said, yesterday ended last night. It just helped keep perspective, the fact that no matter how good you were yesterday and when it ended last night. What I loved about that is that also it was good in reverse. If I messed up and had failure, it ended last night. So many times today's success is the spoiler of tomorrow's success. We want to hold on to what we have, and we're not willing to adapt and change. I was very impressed when you talked a little bit ago, Coach, about the continual adjustments and the fact that this new recruiting class is different than 5 years ago. And if you're not changing, you're not up front as far as getting in front of that change, you're going to be left behind. One quick thing on that. I used to talk about change quite a bit in leadership forums, and I mistakenly thought that followers didn't like change and leaders did like change because they're kind of blazing the well. And all of a sudden it hit me, no, most leaders I know, they don't like change either unless it's their idea. And the moment it's their idea, they like it. But if it's someone else's idea, many times they're the ones, in fact, stop the change. And it really began to help me understand again that if leadership is not fluid and is not continually aware and adjusting, it's going to get left behind very quickly. Somebody else is going to be leading it very soon. We got to constantly be ready to make those necessary changes to lead well.
I will add this, the great question about complacency, because every person watching this is going to deal with it. Any success is going to be followed by complacency. And one of the big reasons we're here, and what I've learned from John over the many, many years of studying him, is that you want to avoid complacency, develop leadership on your team within the ranks. And everybody says, and this is also in a book we wrote, it says, average leaders have a quote, good leaders have a plan, exceptional leaders have a system. And we have a system in place now. For many, many years, I didn't have one. I'd show a good quote. I use John's stuff all the time, but that's simply a quote. Or you have a speaker come in, and the speaker leaves. What'd you do? You had a speaker come in. Yeah. That's not a system. That's a quote. I used to walk in any major college football facility in America, and there's quotes around the room. Absolutely. And I love quotes. And I look, but I'm like, what the heck does that have to do with? And if it's up there, but the players don't understand it, and it's not part of a system, that's simply what it is. I was guilty of that for many, many. I'm not guilty of it anymore. We have a very clear, concise system in place that adapts every year, but at least it's a system now. When I was at Florida or maybe Utah, we taught leadership, but it was kind of a, hey, this is a great article. Let's use this. Let's use John, this great message that he had. But it's not systematic. Imagine teaching football without a system. Yeah. What would that look like? Running an offensive play that's not part of a system. How in the world can you teach leadership without a systematic approach to? It's no different than teaching chemistry. You don't just start throwing stuff at them, or that's exactly what you get stuck with. So back to and I love that question because that drives me every day. How do you avoid complacency? Number one, make sure that your leaders within the ranks in your locker room and on your coaching staff.
That's right.
That's powerful. That. Like any business, talented depth is key. Obviously, you experienced it 2 years ago. We talked about that. What are the odds that a third-string quarterback leads a team to the national championship? How do you keep that? How do you build that and keep that? I mean, everybody comes and they want to be the star today. For you to tell them there's a role for you, but it's not the star, you're going to be there in a couple of years. How do you inspire? How do you build depth?
That's all part of a cultural blueprint that we have now. It's uncommon. If I'm a young man going to come select a school, I'm not just going to be a starter when maybe I'm going to lose some games. I want to go to a championship level program, but I also want to make sure that I'm being taught for when this football stuff's over. Why would that third string quarterback play? He did not want to let his teammates down, which goes back to the different forms of motivation, love being strongest.
That's beautiful. Depth is a challenge, I think, for any leader. To build a team that not only plays the first team, second team, and I think that once you're more interested in developing your people than developing your program, it all changes.
Absolutely.
Of course, they're coming on a football scholarship. Of course, they're gifted in sports. But they're looking beyond that, and they're beginning to understand, you're not going to do that, coach, unless you really care for the person. If you just really care for them as a football player, you're going to do football stuff and basically hope that they make it after that. That's the secret a lot of times of depth. Some people, I think, would rather play on a second team for a coach that sees them more than just a ball player, but wants the best for them. I mean, when you interviewed John Wooden, what did you hear from the players all the time? Coach taught life lessons. Right. He prepared me for life. Very seldom do I ever hear his ball players talk about the plays he was designing for them. It was the fact he looked beyond them. And when you would go be with coach, or when I'd go be with coach, you know what happened. That phone always rang. He never picked it up because he's talking, but you'd hear the players come over. Hey, coach, this is Bill Walton. How you doing today? Everything okay? Is there anything I can do for you? And they were just always checking in with him because they knew how much he really cared for them.
Several years ago, I used to live and teach leadership to our team, and the quote that I would use, and I can't recall where I think I adapted a little bit, but I used to say, the job of a leader is to set a standard and demand all live up to that. I disagree with that completely now. Yeah. And it's just over the last few years, the number one job of a leader is to earn their trust. Absolutely. And then you set a standard, then you equip and inspire those so they can achieve the standard. But before you earn trust, you'd have a hard time leading a group of people out of this building unless they trust you. So you go back to, how do you get someone to trust you? I can tell you to trust me, or I can show you. That's one of the reasons we do all the Real Life Wednesdays. That's one reason we get to know their families. If you're a football player and you know that my staff has your best interest, we're going to get you a job, get you an internship at Goldman Sachs. We're going to make sure you get the best strength coach, best nutrition, best hydration program in America. You're going to start trusting us. And then it's much easier to motivate a team to go do some of the uncomfortable things that teams have to do.
Stephen Covey wrote the book, The Speed of Trust. And the whole thesis of that book is, once people trust you, they move fast. But if they don't trust you, they're saying, okay, now what's the angle here and what's this mean to me? And I love that book because it just basically says, once you have a trust culture, everybody's ready to dive in. And you don't have to constantly deal with the issues of motivating them or why are we doing this? And when you were talking about that, I just thought it allows a program to move really quick once that trust is established.
Where is trust at the highest level? Special forces in the United States military. There's no higher trust. What we do is candy compared to that. So you tell me, when we're going to go take that hill, take that home, take that, if I don't trust you, we're not getting out of the helicopter. Yeah. It's not going to happen. So what does the special forces spend all their time on? Navy SEALs, everybody uses the SEALs examples like we do. It's built on trust. And it's not easy. So that's, I could talk about this for hours. It's amazing that 10 years ago, I'm not sure I believed that. Think about that quote that we use, set a standard and demand all live up to that. That sounds like a dictatorship. So I'm going to say, do this and do that. How far does that get you? As opposed to, the number one is earn their trust, then set a standard, then inspire and equip them with the tools to achieve those standards.
What a great conversation with two great leaders in John C. Maxwell and Urban Meyer. I encourage you to develop a culture of learning. As a leader, complacency is your worst enemy. Coach Meyer mentioned that average leaders have a quote, good leaders have a plan, and great leaders have a system. So what's your system? If you love John Maxwell's leadership insights in today's conversations, check out episode 8 when we talk about basketball's influence on his leadership. You will also find more on John at johnmaxwell.com. If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yeager, who did that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man? Great, sir. How are
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. We are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code podcast at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager, Yaeger, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.